had issues with yesterday or Monday on our thing. I'm going to use this as a way to kind of show that. So I showed this before, my coins that I can collect, right? I showed that before. This is what I worked on yesterday. So I wanted to build our building, which is the building we're currently in. So I was able to find a blueprint of it, and then I brought that into Illustrator and I traced out all the walls and door openings and window openings and everything. And now I have our building. So this is the print room here. And then this is Brian's office. And then there's my office right there. It's really small. And this is the video studio. And then this is that door back there. And there's this door. And then this is where Jen is sitting. And then there's the windows, and here's where I am. Okay? So literally like the entire area I went through and built. Like if I zoom out a whole lot, you can see all of the stuff. Yeah. So this literally took me like, I don't know, 6 or 8 hours to build all this stuff. And that's with testing it, bringing it back and forth. And then going through, whoops, I want to move that. And then this is what I built just kind of today. This is the signage that will go out on the walls. But a lot of the work involved in this is going through and cleaning up some of the stuff. So like when you take regular curves from Illustrator and you bring them into Maya, you can just go to create curves or Illustrator object, and it'll bring in just the curves, or it'll create a bevel. And the bevel is like a polygon object. It's just straight. There's nothing fancy to it. But all the stuff where like the doors are, so like right here, there's a door that's going to go right there. Well, obviously there has to be something kind of here holding the door up. So I had to go through and start to cut this up. And this isn't how it's going to be. I took pictures today, which I'll show. But there'd be some sort of bridge right there that would connect it so that this wall could have a door right there. Okay. I also went through these windowed areas, and I put these in here too. And if I turn on my layer, that's not the layer. I may have deleted those ones because I didn't need them anymore. Did I? I did. No, I didn't. Oh, I wasn't showing them. There we go. So all of these areas too, once I get inside the room, there we go. I had to build these blinds, and then I had to go, like, because the blueprint is not really a blueprint. It was more of like a vector drawing someone did years ago, so it's not 100% accurate. So some of these window openings were this big, some of them were that big, and so I had to even them all out because I didn't want to have to rebuild a custom window for each individual building, okay, or each individual room. So I used this as a template and went around to each one of these, literally like in the top view here. There we go. And there's that curtain, and then I made sure that these wall edges were lined up perfectly with each one of those. So it takes a long time to do that kind of thing, but the awesome thing is that now that I have just the basic shape, now I can go through and start to populate it with stuff. So one of the challenges of this obviously is what does it look like, because in our 3D world it's one thing, you know, to have this stuff, and realistically I could go through and customize it however I want, but I wanted to create a pretty, not 100% accurate, but pretty close representation to give an idea of what the building looks like. These are the offices down the end of the hall too. So the blueprint also had some other stuff, like this doorway wasn't in the blueprint, so I had to go through and cut a hole for that one. My office, my old office, wasn't there even on this thing, so I had to put that in too. Okay, so that's where I'm at as far as this goes. Now here's all the pictures that I took. So this morning I went around and I went through and got pictures of like every single room. I didn't care about the coloring, I was more concerned with the items that are inside it. That way I could create some sort of representation of that in the software. So all of these things, like this desk right here, and this chair, and the computer, mouse, and keyboard, Eventually I'll create like one standard model of that, and then I can take that standard model and put it across every single one of my Mac rooms, because pretty much all the Mac rooms are the same. No one's going to care that these Macs here are not the same Macs as the ones in Brian's room. They're different, but nobody's going to care. Or the same thing with the chairs. Some things I will not include in there, like this big mess that's back here and someone left the broom out, so I will not include those. Things like these signs that are here, I need to include those in there because that's kind of like one of the trademarks of what's going to make this navigable, because I've been around this building a lot over the past 20 years or so I know, but obviously someone who's using this isn't going to know. So I have to make signs for all of these. And one of the challenges of that is I don't want to have to make a different model for each sign, because that would be kind of silly, but I need a quick way to change these out for every single one of the rooms that's inside my scene. Okay, so eventually I'll have to go through and build a texture that's for these types of things for each one of those. I'll also have to go through and put up little knickknacks like speakers are in pretty much all the computer rooms, clocks are in all the rooms. You can see here's those computers, same-ish settings. I thought this would be kind of cool to put Brian's artwork in there too. There's the job board, there's some other things, there's those things. These things here, I'll have to make these as well. And these are a little bit different than the other ones. These are rounded on the sides and square on the top. These signs are actually different. You'll see that these ones are perfectly rounded compared to the ones I just showed you a second ago. That look like, where did I put it? Pops. Select. There it is. That look like this. That is just like a square blocky shape. Okay, so those are different, but I'm going to standardize it so I don't have to have two different ones for each of these. Another thing that's kind of an issue was the doors. Because I didn't have, I'm looking at a blueprint, I don't know how tall the ceilings are, I don't know how tall the doors are, so I was guesstimating on a lot of that. You'll see that these doors go right up to the ceiling, and if you look at my doors, they do not. My doors are below the ceiling, so I may lower the ceiling a little bit, just so I can get it to look a little bit more accurate. You'll see we have a little bit of gap right there. Or maybe I'll shrink the whole thing because maybe I need to, because that guy, maybe it's a little bit too big. And measure that out and see. And then here's that room, garbage cans. Like in this room, the ceilings are pretty tall compared to out there, which is obviously a lot different. That's the storeroom, these things. So these signs here, like I knew that we had signs like this, but I never really paid attention to the fact that most of these are blank. Like there's only a few of them that actually have writing on them. And I show that in a second, I think. It's all the video room stuff. Right there. So these are blank, blank, blank for some reason, and then there's one, and then blank, blank, blank. So I'll be eliminating a lot of those too. You know, the middle signs. So a lot of the pictures I took for this stuff because I wanted to make sure I had enough detail to kind of show off all the different things that are kind of important to each of the rooms and important to kind of showing off the building. Any of the rooms that weren't in MACA I didn't get pictures of because I'm just going to keep those doors locked. But the idea would be that, oopsie, as they're walking around this area, they'll get to a door, and if they can open it, that's an MACA door. They can walk in, and they'll be able to see artwork that's on the walls. They'll be able to click to play videos, or I don't know what yet. One thing at a time. Okay. So what I want to show is just the process of how to create something, and then texture map it, and then do that again. People requested last time that we do a little bit more texture map stuff, UV layout stuff. So that's what we're going to do. So let me find a computer room. That's the offices. Oh, another thing, it came in backwards. Like the offices that are on this side were on the opposite side. I had a hard time finding my way around the building for a minute. There we go. Okay. So now we're inside this room here. So there we go. So let's say we're going to build a keyboard. Okay. So I can build. Back to my room. I like to build the stuff in the exact area where it would go. It just makes things a little bit easier to kind of lay out. All right, so this is my keyboard. Obviously this is huge. I need to shrink this down. So I'm going to shrink it down to about the size of a keyboard. Once I had a desk in here and a computer and all that, it's all relative to how I want to lay it out. Okay, so there's my keyboard shape. Now, if this was something that you're going to be doing a product rendering, like this is something that, you know, we're working for Logitech and we want to build an actual keyboard that we can get super close to and really show this off, I'm going to go through and I'm going to model pretty much every single key that's on this keyboard, okay? But because we're not doing that, I can get away with a lot more stuff on here. So I'm going to just create a very simple model of a keyboard. So I'm just going to pull that down. I'm going to offset this, so I scaled it a little bit, or extruded it a little bit. And then I'm going to extrude it again. Pull that up. Like that. Okay. So there's my keyboard. All right. Now I'm going to lay out the UVs for the keyboard. So I have a material already. So I already created my checkerboard. Once you create the checkerboard once, you don't need to recreate it every single time. A few people are getting mixed up on that. You're creating a new surface shader for every single object. You don't need to do that. It applies to all of them. So just make sure that you've created one, and that one has the repeats set to the same exact amount. If these are different, then no matter what I do, these are never going to be square. Okay? They have to be the same number. That way I'm working with square items, and that way it'll look like it's square. All right. So the first thing I do is I delete history. Then I freeze transforms, and then I do a basic one of these guys: cylindrical, planar, or spherical. Okay. So in this case, it's pretty square, so I'm going to do a planar. So I'm going to go to the Y direction and just do a planar. Now it didn't matter if I did it in Y, in X, or in Z most of the time, but if I pick the one that it's mostly facing, then it's a little bit easier for it to work. Okay, and what I mean by that is most of these surfaces are facing up, so I did it in the Y direction so that it shoots most of those facing down. If I did it this way, it's not going to hit all of those, and sometimes you'll get weird issues. Okay, now when I say sometimes, it literally is sometimes. Sometimes it's going to work perfectly when you just do this and cut it and then lay it out or unfold it, and it works perfect. Sometimes it doesn't, and you have to lay out individual surfaces or tweak things or whatever. Alright, so now that I've laid it out, all of these pieces are all on top of each other. Okay, and that's the goal of that. Okay, we don't want to have them kind of scattered or broken up. We want one solid shape that we can then start working off of. So looking at this shape, where do you see a spot that I could cut this from? The corner, like right here? Okay. So if I cut it there. Alright, where else? All of them? Okay. Anywhere else? We'll get to that in a second. Any other spots? Around the top, and then where? I'm going to go to multi, that way I can grab faces and edges. Maybe. Zoom in close enough. Nope, I'll just do this first. Or it won't let me do that in there, so I'll have to just manually click these. So now let's try to unfold this. So I'm going to grab all the pieces and I'm going to unfold. Now make sure your settings are set to unfold here. This is 4096, and this can be maybe 1 or 2, but I definitely wouldn't have this up too high. There we go. Okay, so now it's unfolded. So now if I hit 6, we'll see we pretty much get squares. Now we did miss, like, these side pieces do not have any UVs on them laid out nicely. Okay, now the reason for that is they just didn't lay out nice. And here they are on the bottom. Here's this piece here and that piece there are right next to each other. Was that? They do.
Oh, it's the screen.
What do you mean?
The projection screen.
Oh, yeah. And then this piece and this piece are pretty much nowhere to be seen on here. And this is what I was talking about. Sometimes these things just won't project. So when that happens and they're not unfolding, I just go back to my UVs, I go to my planer, and I figure out which direction they're in. So if I look at this little manipulator in the corner, this is the Z direction that they're facing. Okay? So when I turn it this way, Z is facing left and right. These faces are facing left and right. So I click Z and I project it. Okay? It doesn't matter what they look like here because I'm going to unfold it again. But now I can take these and then go to Edit. Oops. Then go to Unfold. And now it unfolds it. Okay? So now everything is unfolded. Now the squares are not squares. They may be squares here and maybe squares there and here, but they're not uniform across the entire thing. That doesn't happen until we do a layout. Once we do layout, then it makes everything nice and even, or it should. So now we'll go to Layout. We make sure it's Unfold, 4096, Preserve 3D Ratios, 4096, 2 and 2, 4 and 4, something like that, and then Layout. And then this step is the one where we should see nice UVs laid out. There we go. Okay, so now it looks pretty uniform across all these pieces. Now these here, these look like they're rectangles. They're not. They're just cut. Okay, so that square at the bottom, we're only seeing half of that square because it's getting cut in half. Now I could verify that by going to my checkerboard and just adding more repeats. So if I added 60 and 60, or even more than that, 120 and 120, then I would definitely be able to tell for sure those are squares in there, not rectangles. Okay? So if you have issues with kind of seeing it when you have these small parts, add more divisions to it and then you'll be able to see that better. The idea is that across the board, we have squares everywhere and they're consistently sized. Okay, these ones aren't huge and these ones aren't small. They're both the same size. I'm going to go blind if I keep it like that, so I'm going to go to 40 and 40. Or 20 and 20. That's better. Okay. So now back to Jenna's question, do we need to cut all 4 corners? Okay, and that is a specific thing for your own UV layout. Okay, if you can find a way to have less parts, that's always better. The least amount of parts on there while maintaining the biggest resolution, that's your balancing act. So if I went into this and I went to edges and I clicked on this edge, what should happen is it should highlight the edge that it's friends with. Where's your friend? He's probably up here. Yep. So you see how it highlighted this edge here? When we cut it, it's just separating those 2 pieces. So where those 2 edges come together, if I pick one edge, it'll automatically pick the other edge. That way I know that they're together. So then I could go in here and say, sew these together. Okay, oops. I actually want to go to move and sew those together. Okay, now this edge up here, I could also click on and do a move and sew too. Now once I did that, where is this edge at? Let's see, this. Right there. Now once I did that, it probably distorted that edge because what's happening is we've taken this square shape and we've like stretched it out so it's like this. Okay, so I could go through and grab everything again, do another unfold, and you'll see how it fixes that by keeping it at a 90-degree angle. Okay, and then just to kind of show this again, I'm going to set this to 150 and 150. There we go. Okay, so now we still have squares in that area, which is perfect. We haven't distorted it, it's still square shaped. Okay, but now we have this big check mark here. Okay, so let me go to the other one and do the same thing. All right, Alright, so I grab those two pieces. I'm going to go to Move and Sew. It puts those together. Let me go to this piece here. His friend is way down there. You always want to look where they're connecting so you know where it's at. This one's going to connect to... I don't see his friend, but let's just see what happens. There it is. Okay. So now we'll unfold it again. There we go. Okay. So far this actually worked out pretty good. Now if I start to go any less on these points, if I start to put these more together like these two, okay, now watch what happens when I sew all this stuff together or unfold this. Alright, nothing too bad there. Let's try it one more time. Okay, actually not a bad deal. So we were able to get this down to a just a few parts. Now if I went into these two here and I move and sew these, you see how long that piece is? So what it's going to do when it unfolds is it's going to fit that long piece into this square. And when it does fit that long piece into that square, everything gets sized down to fit into that square too. So watch the size of these squares out here when I do this. So I'm going to go to Unfold. And you see how they got bigger? Okay? These squares got bigger because those got smaller. That will take you some time to get used to the fact that that's what's going to happen. When that gets smaller, these get bigger. So what happened is we've lost resolution on our object. Okay? And what I mean by lost resolution is that when we go into Substance or Mari or Painter or any of these programs where we're putting texture on these items, that square is our texture. So the bigger we fill up that spot with our object, the more texture we can fit into it, the more detail we can fit into it. If I wrote my name in Photoshop, I don't have it open, if I wrote my name in Photoshop in 200 pixels, then I could not read it very good. But if I wrote it in 2000 pixels, I have a lot more detail that I could add to that, okay? So if we look at this area here, let's just look at, just this line, okay? This line right here, I'm not going to be able to fit a whole lot of pixels inside there. So in this case, I actually do want to break this up. I could actually have less pieces, but with this, I do want to cut that up because I do want to have, back to here, this, where these surfaces are making a bit more sense, okay? Now, the other thing I want to play with is this. So this is my top face right here, right there. I want to make sure that this is straight on. So when I do my texture for this, I don't want it at a wonky angle like this one is, okay? So let me just set that one up like this. Alright, now the other thing we can kind of look at is deciding what the purpose of each item is. So when I do my MACA hallway or MACA classrooms, I need to optimize my scene as much as possible. And this may not sound like a lot, but this is an extra face. When I take that extra face and I multiply it times 20 computers in this room, and I multiply it times all the computers in all the other rooms, it starts to add up. Maybe not for this one item, but for every item I don't do this to, it does add up. So I could actually delete that face because nobody's going to see it, okay? I'm never going to have the keyboards flipped over. It's never going to be like a end of days kind of thing where people walk in and there's keyboards thrown all over the place. It's not like that, okay? So, and then because I did that, I can then maybe add more detail to something else that might be more important and not have to worry about, screwing myself on sizings. All right, now if we look at the keyboard, we say, okay, well, look at all this extra space we have. Let's go and re-unfold this. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to get like that, but it's not going to move very much. Right? It moved down to the bottom because the other piece was gone, but it can't get any bigger. For the same reason it couldn't get any bigger before, look at these guys. See these two pieces here, that's as big as those two pieces can get. That's the only spot that they're going to fit. If they went diagonal, my other piece wouldn't fit, so they have to go horizontal. So in this case, I could say, you know what, I really want this to be a high detailed texture. I'm going to go ahead and cut these right there. And then I will unfold it again, and now I can fit a lot more detail inside there. It's not a whole lot more, but it is definitely a bit more than it was before. There it was before, there it is now. Okay. Now what's neat about this too is looking at the bigger picture of how we want to do this. Let's say that I have two kinds of keyboards, which I do, right? I have PC keyboards, which are these ones, and I have Mac keyboards, which are the ones in the other room. So if I were to create this item, let me just grab this, and I duplicated it and scooted it over here, and then I grabbed all the UVs and I scooted this up here like that. Now I have two keyboards on the same one. So on one texture, I can put a Mac keyboard and a PC keyboard. So now my Unreal file doesn't have to worry about whether I'm using a Mac or a PC. It's simply a matter of when I drop in my model, it'll automatically be whichever model I've chosen. Is it going to be this one or is it going to be that one? Okay, so that's more than just a, I'm going to relay this out just to lay it out better. Okay, so that's just stuff that we have to consider as we're laying out our stuff. Now you'll see that it kind of like shifted stuff around once I did that. So I actually don't want to do that. I think I just want to resize this manually. And then move this up. So I'm just doing this manually because I don't want these to actually be separated from the pieces that they belong to. There we go. Okay. So now I have two items. One's a PC keyboard, one's a Mac keyboard. I'll probably actually go through on this one and delete this extra piece because the Mac keyboards are pretty flat. There's not a whole lot to them. And then what I would do is go to my internet and I would find a picture of a keyboard that I want to use. So let's say something like this. And I would take that, bring that into, I could bring it into Substance if I wanted, or I could just go into Photoshop and just put that on as my texture. Outside of Maya, wrong one, grab these. I can go to this, and I can do a UV snapshot. Under 2016, I'm in 2017 because I opened my file, it's under Edit UV Snapshot. And what I can do is say I want to take these as keyboards, 4096 pixels. Okay, and when I hit OK, this actually exports a picture out of my UVs. Then I can just drop that keyboard right on top of where I want that keyboard to be, and then it'll look like a keyboard when I get in here. Okay, it won't have all the buttons, but it'll be enough of a idea of what it's doing. Okay, so while we're waiting for Photoshop to open, let's look at some other objects here. And these are just basic objects that you might run into. So here's a cylinder. Now if I laid out my surface shader on this, you'll see that these are definitely not square right here. These on the top are square. Okay, so just like before, I have to lay this thing out just like everything else. So if I go to UV shell and I grab this stuff and I unfold it, this one automatically gets unfolded. When it gets created initially, it's automatically cut up in the right spots. It's cut up on the top, it's cut up on the bottom, and it's also cut down one of the sides. Okay, but let's pretend that we've done stuff to this. So I'm going to go to my insert edge loop and do that. I'm going to extrude this in. Oops. Gorgeous. Okay. So now here's my new shape. So let's say that I've also scaled this up some. Okay. So my first step is delete history, then freeze my transforms, and then go over to my UV and do one of these basic shapes to it, okay? Now I know that this is a cylinder, so I would pick which one of these? Cylindrical, okay? It's not magical with their cylindrical. You could do planar too if you wanted to. What were you gonna say, Jenna?
Oh, I was just gonna ask if you could, like, for every, for every object you need, could you just do the freeze transforms, like, every time?
Right before? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can. It's only when you get into like animating things that you really want to avoid freezing the transforms at the wrong spot. For what we're doing in this class, we don't have to worry about it, okay? So we could do cylindrical on here, and with this one, it lays it out like that. Then we need to go do our cutting. So where are we going to cut this one?
Probably on middle.
Middle where?
Just on the top.
Here?
And all the way down.
Oh, like this?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we did that cylindrical mapping, it automatically does that for us. Okay? So we don't need to worry about cutting it that way, because when we do cylindrical, it did that. We can kind of tell, because if we look at the number of faces here, it's probably pretty close to the number of faces going around this way. Okay? If it was half that, then we would know that it's actually on top of itself. I'll show you what it would look like. So if we went to planar mapping, yep, that'll be fine. Do you see how it's like this? This doesn't have any cut down the side, okay? So then I would go through and definitely do a cut down the side. All right, so where else would I cut this one? The extrudes?
Yeah.
So like right here,
Right
right there. Anywhere else? Anytime you look at where to cut it, look for change of direction, okay? The more drastic the change of direction, the more it definitely needs a cut, okay? So this one here I actually wouldn't cut, because that face is actually pretty close to that same plane as the faces around it, okay? Had I gone in like that and then down and then out, I would have.
I would go around the flat parts.
That part there
Next left and bottom.
and there.
But
Go ahead.
I would have also done it like at the start and end of each extrude.
Oh, here and here.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. You don't need to do those ones.
Really?
Yep. Because they're so close to the direction of the rest of it, it'll be fine. Okay? Now, we can test that out, because once we do the unfold, if we hit it right, and let me take this down. So when it's so small, it's very difficult to see what it's doing. There we go. Okay? So this is 40 and 40, and you'll see that those turned out pretty good. Okay? What happened to the top? The top didn't work. Okay? We cut it, but there's no UVs there, and we know that because it's gray. So what do I do?
Well, yeah.
Reproject it. So I'm just going to go to this view here where I can see both sides. I'm just going to marquee both sides. Okay? So I have the top and the bottom selected. And then what kind of projection? Planar.
Planar, yeah.
There we go. And then we don't care about the size here. All we're caring about is that they're square, which now they're both square. And now we can do a layout. It takes forever. There it goes. And now it's perfect. Okay. Now, if I were to hit 3 on this, just so you can see it, you'll see that we do get some weird puckering right here. Whenever you smooth something out after you've laid out the UVs, you get weird stuff happening at the seams, weird stuff happening wherever you have those holes. So if you ever plan on smoothing out, you definitely want to make sure you then actually either smooth it out, like so, and then go back in here and grab all your stuff, and then re-unfold it, and then re-lay it out. Still thinking. Or just don't smooth it out. Okay, so now you can see that that looks a lot better than it did a second ago.
Let's go
I don't know what it is. It's a hammerhead.
Yeah.
That works, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's grab another shape. Let's grab a sphere. Oops. And go to the right menu. There we go. Drop our surface shader on here. You'll see that these are rectangles. These are squares. And then when we get to the very top, it's just messed up. Okay? So now, which one of these would I use? Spherical. Okay? That's what we're going to think, but I'm going to show you that this spherical one is actually like pretty sucky. Okay? So I do spherical and I lay it out. There's a couple handles here, if you can see these. These allow us to basically wrap it all the way around. Okay? So it looks like it is exactly the same. Okay, it doesn't do anything, all right? And the sphere is actually a sucky kind of surface, but it's still manageable. We just have to break it up into different shapes. So if we were to take this into cutting it up into different shapes, I see 3 different areas or 3 different sections we could cut this into, okay? So if I go here, you'll see that most of these faces are facing up, right? Most of them are facing at least partly upwards. If I go down to the bottom, these ones are facing mostly down. So I'm going to cut it right there. Oops. I didn't planar map this first. Let me planar map first. I'm just going to planar map this. Perfect. Good. Okay. So I'm going to cut it right here-ish. Right there-ish. Cut. And then I'm also going to cut it from here to here. Okay, so now let's see what happens when I take this and unfold it. Now we get something that actually works. Okay, now the reason this works is because I'm treating this not like a sphere, but I'm treating it like a cylinder. I'm treating it like that top piece is a cap, the bottom piece is a cap, and that center area is like the barrel of the cylinder. Okay, every shape that you get is going to be something completely different. Nothing is going to be as simple as these 3 shapes that I just showed. But if you break them down into these simple shapes, it becomes a lot easier. Anything that you do is going to be the exact same process. Even, let's go to the soccer ball here. Maybe. Where are you at, soccer ball? Come on. Okay, so let's put him on here. And done. Now this one is already broken up into pieces. So this one actually comes out pretty nice. But if you look at how those UVs are cut, it's definitely a different kind of shape than we would probably have expected it to be laid out in. Okay? Some surfaces are going to be crazy, like this one. There's no getting around a crazy surface like this. It's just kind of like figuring out the best way to do it. Let me create a cube. Create polygon cube. There we go. Alright, so here's my cube. Now with something like this, we could go through this whole process of planar mapping it and then cutting it or whatever, but it's a cube, okay? And I want to be able to lay this out in the most optimal form. This is pretty close to optimal, but I can make it more optimal. If I go to my automatic mapping and I just say project, look at how much bigger these pieces are now. Here they were before, there they are now. Okay, and let me put the texture on here so you can see it. Automatic. So you'll see how those squares just get a little bit bigger. Okay, then I could go through if I needed to or wanted to. If it let me deselect, there we go. Then I can start sewing things together if I wanted to keep this as joined pieces. Oops. All right, so there's that piece joined together. Because I like to have, like I said, as few pieces as possible. now if I take this and I put it about there, that actually gets me to a pretty close shape of, a lot better resolution. Okay. Now I could have left it the other way too, but again, if we're trying to maximize our resources, we want to do that kind of thing. If I went and grabbed a pipe, there we go. Okay, delete history, right? Freeze transform. And then I need to start cutting this. Oops, I need to project it first. So we'll go to project. And just like the cylinder, cylindrical, and then start cutting everywhere there's a major change. There's only 4 spots in this one that there's a major change in direction. Cut. Unfold. There we go. And then again, the tops didn't lay out. No big deal. We grab the top, shift click the bottom, and we do a planar map on those. And then we grab all of it, and then we lay it out. Okay, so as you're doing anything, your challenge that you had, it's not just for an assignment just to like waste time that day. It's basically to kind of test how quickly you can go through these steps. So right now I've laid out the UVs on, obviously these are simple objects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects, okay, within a relatively short amount of time. Okay, so if you found that during the test or during the challenge that your UV layout was not as quick as you want it to be, do that. Okay, if you take 20 minutes or a half hour or an hour to do that, you're going to get quicker at doing it. If you found that modeling was an area where you struggled with, watch more modeling videos when you're working on other stuff, or just watch more modeling videos in general, or practice modeling more stuff. The idea with the class that you guys are in is that you're preparing yourself for real world things where you're going to be like in a company doing this kind of stuff. So you got to be able to work as quickly as possible to do that. And the only way you get there is not by just following my lessons. It's about always analyzing where you're at and what you're doing, and then trying to say, what areas do I need to improve on, okay?